My mother always told me never to pick up hitchhikers. "Roxanne," she'd say, "that's how you end up in a ditch." Then again, my mother never saw a 6'5" ad for Sin standing next to a smoking $3 million Bugatti in the middle of a monsoon. The rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to scrub the pavement clean. But he didn't look like a drowned rat. He looked like a statue carved out of marble and arrogance, staring at the steam rising from his hood as if he could intimidate the engine into starting again. Most women would lock their doors and speed up. I downshifted. I didn't care if he was dangerous. I had a tire iron under my seat and a bad attitude. I was the one he should be worried about. Welcome back to Raven's Library, your sanctuary for romance and escape. Before we dive into today's story, I want to see just how far our pack extends. Scroll down to the comments right now and let me know. Where in the world are you listening from today? I love seeing our community grow across the map. And if you hate waiting for cliffhangers, consider hitting that join button. Members of the library get early access to future uploads, meaning you hear the story before anyone else. Plus, you get those exclusive loyalty badges to stand out in the comments. Now, get comfortable. It's time to turn the page. Chapter 1: The Mechanic and the Mannequin. The wipers on my '69 Mustang were fighting a losing battle against the storm, slapping a frantic rhythm against the glass that matched the classic rock blasting through my speakers. I loved this weather. It kept the amateurs off the road and gave the highway a slick, dangerous feel that made my engine purr. But then, I saw the taillights. Ahead of me, hazard lights blinked through the gray curtain of rain like the eyes of a dying beast. As I got closer, the shape resolved itself. It was a Bugatti Chiron, sleek, black, and utterly useless. It was a piece of engineering art that cost more than my entire auto shop, and it was currently serving as a very expensive lawn ornament on the shoulder of Route 66. And standing next to it, completely unbothered by the fact that he was getting absolutely soaked, was the driver. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. The fabric was plastered to him, outlining shoulders that were far too broad for a civilian, and thighs that looked like they could crush walnuts. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at the empty highway with golden brown eyes that seemed to glow in the headlights. He didn't wave for help. He didn't look desperate. He looked annoyed, like the rain had personally offended him, and he was waiting for it to apologize. I could have kept driving. I should have kept driving. But I'm a mechanic down to my grease-stained fingernails, and leaving a machine like that stranded felt like a sin. Plus, I liked trouble. I tapped the brakes, feeling the Mustang's rear tires slide just an inch. Controlled chaos, before pulling up alongside the sleek hypercar. I didn't offer a polite wave. I cranked the handle and rolled down the passenger window. The sound of the storm roared into the cabin, instantly drowning out the radio. The man didn't flinch. He slowly turned his head, locking eyes with me. The air in my car suddenly felt thinner. Even through the rain, his gaze was heavy. It felt like being scanned by a predatory radar. Most guys looked at me and saw a girl in a flannel shirt. This guy looked at me like he was calculating exactly how many seconds it would take to dismantle my life. I leaned across the passenger seat, shouting over the thunder. "Nice paperweight you got there, buddy." He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. "Do you have a satellite phone?" His voice was deep enough to rattle my dashboard. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. "Nope," I shouted back, flashing a grin that usually made men nervous. "Cell towers are down 3 miles back. You're in the dead zone, suit boy. And by the looks of that steam, your radiator just filed for divorce." He looked back at his car, then back at me, his expression tightening. He clearly wasn't used to hearing the word no, and he definitely wasn't used to taking automotive diagnostics from a woman with motor oil on her cheek. "I will wait for my security detail," he said, turning his back on me, dismissing me. Oh, hell no. I wasn't going to leave him out here to catch pneumonia just because his ego was waterproof. I revved my engine, the Mustang's V8 roaring like a dragon clearing its throat, demanding his attention. He turned back, eyebrows raised. "Look around!" I yelled, gesturing to the empty, flooded void of the highway. "Your security detail isn't coming. The bridge is washed out 10 miles east. You stand there another hour, and you're going to be a very handsome popsicle." I unlocked the passenger door with a loud thunk. "Get in!" I ordered, using the same tone I used on my German shepherds when they tried to eat trash. "Unless you want to drown out there, pretty boy." For a second, I thought he might actually rip my door off its hinges. He stepped closer, the rain dripping from his sharp nose, and leaned down until his face was inches from mine. Up close, his eyes weren't just brown, they were gold, swirling with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature. The smell of him hit me instantly. Ozone, expensive cologne, and something wild, like a forest before a fire. He smirked, a dark, dangerous expression that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You are making a mistake," he murmured, his voice sliding under the sound of the rain, smooth and lethal. "You have no idea who I am." Chapter 2. Shotgun Rules. I let out a short, sharp laugh that fogged up the window between us. "Buddy, I don't care if you're the Pope or the King of England. Unless your blood acts like antifreeze, you're going to freeze to death. Now, get in the car, or I'm driving off and leaving you to explain to your tailor why you ruined that suit." He stared at me for another second, his jaw working as if he were chewing on the audacity of my tone. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this. That much was obvious. He was used to hushed whispers and bowed heads, but Route 66 in a thunderstorm didn't care about hierarchy. And neither did I. Finally, he moved. He pulled the door handle and slid into the passenger seat. The entire Mustang dipped to the right under his weight. He was massive, way bigger than he looked standing up. In the confined space of the cabin, he felt like a mountain range squeezed into a shoebox. His knees instantly hit the dashboard, and he had to spread his legs just to fit. "Close the door!" I yelled over the wind. He slammed it shut, sealing us in. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic thwack hiss of the wipers and the low idle of the engine. Then, the smell hit me. It wasn't just rain and expensive cologne anymore. In the warm, dry air of the car, his scent was overwhelming. It was cedar, dark roast coffee, and something deeply metallic, like a blade just pulled from a forge. It triggered a weird instinct in the base of my brain, a little voice that whispered, "Danger. Safety. Mine." I shook my head to clear the fog. "Buckle up," I said, reaching for the gear stick. "It's going to be a bumpy ride." He didn't move to put on his seatbelt. He just sat there, water dripping from his dark hair onto the leather upholstery, staring at me with those unnerving gold-flecked eyes. He took a deep breath, inhaling the air of the cabin like he was trying to memorize the molecular structure of my oxygen. His pupils dilated until the gold was almost swallowed by black. Vanilla, he murmured. His voice was a low rumble that I felt in the soles of my boots. And motor oil. Yeah, well, it's a working car, not a limo, I snapped, feeling heat rise up my neck that had nothing to do with the heater. Sorry if I don't smell like roses and compliance. I hate roses, he said, his gaze dropping to my throat. They are artificial. This is real. The intensity in the air spiked so hard I almost choked. I reached for the door lock on my side, just a habit, but before I could touch it, I heard a loud click. I looked over. He had pressed the master lock button on his armrest. The doors were bolted. I narrowed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel. What do you think you're doing? I picked you up, pal. Don't make me regret it. Unlock the door. He didn't look away from me. He leaned back against the seat, expanding his chest, taking up all the oxygen in the room. He looked less like a stranded motorist now, and more like a predator who had just walked into a trap on purpose. Drive, Roxanne, he commanded softly. How do you know my name? I demanded, my hand slipping toward the tire iron under my seat. He nodded at the dashboard. It is on your mechanic's license, displayed right there. He pointed a long, calloused finger at the laminated card I'd tossed on the dash. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that made my toes curl. And I locked the door for your safety, not mine. Because once you realize what you've just invited into your car, your first instinct is going to be to run. Hands on the wheel. I don't run. I lied. I slammed the car into first gear, enjoying the aggressive jerk of the transmission, and peeled back onto the highway. The tires spun for a fraction of a second on the wet asphalt before biting down, launching us forward. Slow down, he said calmly. My car, my rules, I shot back, keeping my eyes glued to the rain-slicked road. You're just cargo. Sit there and look pretty. The problem was, he was doing exactly that. In the glow of the dashboard lights, he was distractingly handsome. His wet shirt was clinging to him like a second skin, translucent enough to show the dark ink of tattoos covering his chest. I tried to focus on the yellow lines of the road, but the cabin was too small. Every time I had to downshift for a curve, the motion required me to pull the stick shift back and to the right, and every single time, my knuckles grazed the inside of his thigh. The first time it happened, he flinched like I'd shocked him with a live wire. The second time, I felt the muscle of his leg turn to steel under the fabric of his trousers. You need a bigger car, he gritted out, staring straight ahead through the windshield, his hands gripping his knees so hard his knuckles were white. This is a classic, I defended, dropping into third gear. My hand brushed him again. A lingering friction of skin against expensive wool. The heat radiating off him was insane. It was like sitting next to a furnace. She was built for speed, not for giants. I am not a giant, he muttered. I am average size. Maybe where you come from, I laughed, relaxing a little. But around here, we corn-fed humans aren't built like brick walls. What do they feed you guys in the city? Steroids and arrogance? He turned his head slowly to look at me. The movement was predatory, fluid. They feed us power, and we take what we want. The air in the car shifted again. The playful banter died, replaced by that thick, suffocating tension. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel his gaze on my profile, tracing the line of my jaw, my neck, my shoulder. It wasn't a creepy stare. It was a hungry one. It made me want to pull over and do something stupid. I needed to shift into fourth. I reached for the stick, but the angle was awkward. My hand fumbled, and instead of grabbing the knob, my palm landed flat on his thigh, high up near his hip. For a second, neither of us moved. My hand was burning. His leg was rock hard. "Don't," he groaned, the sound tearing out of his throat. I snatched my hand back like I'd touched a hot stove. "Sorry, I told you it's tight in here." He didn't accept the apology. He reached out, faster than any human should be able to move, and grabbed the dashboard, his fingers digging into the vinyl padding. He wasn't angry. He was in pain. The kind of pain that comes from holding back a tidal wave. "Roxanne," he warned, his voice vibrating with a dark, primal edge that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Keep your hands on the wheel. If you touch me like that again, we aren't making it to your destination. I will have you in the back seat before the car even stops rolling." Chapter 4. The Interrogation. I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "Is that a threat?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my pulse was doing jumping jacks in my throat. "It is a promise of lack of restraint," he replied, finally releasing his death grip on my dashboard. He exhaled a long breath, forcing his shoulders to drop an inch. "Talk to me. Distract me. Tell me about the car." "You want to talk shop?" I asked, surprised. Usually, guys like him, suits, corporate types, didn't know a piston from a spark plug. "I want to know what consumes the mind of a woman who drives into a storm instead of away from it," he said. So I talked. I told him about the Mustang, how I'd found her rusting in a barn when I was 17, and spent every paycheck for 5 years restoring her. I told him about my garage, Vane's Auto, and how I was the only female mechanic in 3 counties who could rebuild a transmission blindfolded. He listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't mansplain, didn't check a watch. He just watched me, his golden eyes tracking my lips as I spoke. "You built this engine yourself?" he asked, sounding genuinely impressed. "Every bolt," I said with pride. "She runs hot, but she's loyal." "Loyalty is rare," he murmured, a shadow passing over his face. "Rarer than gold, even among my kind." "Your kind?" I glanced at him. "What are you, mafia? CIA? Some secret society of guys who stand in the rain looking broody?" He chuckled, a low, dark sound that did dangerous things to my insides. "Something like that. I manage territories, large ones. It involves a lot of conflict resolution." "Sounds stressful," I said. "It is lonely," he corrected. He reached out then. I thought he was going to grab the wheel, but his hand moved toward my face. I froze, taking my foot off the gas slightly. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, right under my eye. The skin contact was electric, a jolt of static that zapped straight down my spine and curled in my belly. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "You have grace," he whispered, his eyes soft. "Right here." He wiped a smudge of oil from my skin, examining it on his thumb like it was precious metal. I didn't have time to wash up before I left the shop," I stammered, my fierce persona crumbling under his touch. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice thick. "It suits you. Better than makeup. It shows you build things. I spend my life destroying things. To see someone who creates." He trailed off, his thumb lingering on my jawline. Suddenly, the world outside went white. A crack of thunder shook the car so hard the suspension rattled. The rain intensified, turning into a solid wall of water. The wipers were useless now. I couldn't see the hood of the car, let alone the road. "Damn it!" I swore, slamming on the brakes. The Mustang fishtailed, sliding dangerously on the hydroplaning asphalt. I fought the wheel, wrestling the car back into a straight line as we skidded to a near halt. "I can't see," I breathed, panic finally piercing my confidence. "We can't drive in this. We have to pull over." Chapter 5. Nowhere to Go. There, Dominic said, pointing a sharp finger through the deluge. Through the gray wash, I saw the flickering red neon of a sign buzzing in the darkness, the Blue Moon Motel. The M was burned out, so it read, the Blue Oon Hotel. It looked like the kind of place where horror movies started, but right now, it looked like a palace. I crawled the car into the gravel lot, parking as close to the overhang as I could. Make a run for it? I asked. Go, he ordered. We burst out of the car. The rain was instant and violent, soaking me to the bone in the 3 seconds it took to sprint to the lobby door. Dominic was right behind me, his large body shielding me from the worst of the wind. We tumbled into the lobby, breathless and dripping. It was a small, dingy room with wood paneling from the 70s and a smell of stale cigarettes. Behind the counter sat an elderly man with thick glasses, reading a newspaper. He looked up, annoyed at the intrusion. We're full, he grunted, not really looking at us. Storm knocked out the power to the occupied rooms, so no refunds if... Then he saw Dominic. The old man froze. The newspaper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. His eyes went wide, magnifying behind his glasses, and all the color drained from his face. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward with a crash. I looked at Dominic. He was standing tall, water dripping from his nose, radiating an aura of terrifying authority that filled the small room. He wasn't just a wet guy in a suit anymore. He looked like a king inspecting a dungeon. The clerk's hands shook. He started to lower his head, his knees bending as if he were about to drop to the floor in worship. You're... the old man stammered, his voice trembling with genuine fear. I didn't know. I didn't expect the Alpha. The King. I frowned, looking between them. The Alpha? The King? What was this guy talking about? Was Dominic a celebrity I didn't recognize? Before the clerk could finish his sentence, Dominic moved. He didn't run. He just blurred. Suddenly, he was at the counter, leaning over it, his index finger pressed firmly to his own lips. His eyes were blazing with a silent, lethal command. Quiet, Dominic whispered. The single word was heavier than the thunder outside. You have no idea who I am. Do you understand? Chapter 6. One Room Left. The clerk swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a cork in a storm. He nodded rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the room. Understood. Completely understood, sir. I looked between them, confused. Okay, am I missing something? Did you rob a bank? Are you a senator? Dominic didn't look at me. He kept his gaze pinned on the terrified old man. A room. Now. Yes, of course. The clerk fumbled with a drawer, his hand shaking so badly he dropped a set of keys before snatching up another. I only have one left. Room 4, the honeymoon suite. I mean, it's just a room with a jacuzzi that doesn't work, but it has a king bed. It's the only one with clean sheets. One bed, Dominic repeated, his voice tight. He closed his eyes for a brief second, as if praying for patience or restraint. Of course there is only one bed. It's fine, I said, snatching the key from the clerk's trembling hand. I was wet, cold, and tired. I didn't care if we had to sleep in a bathtub. I'm not picky. Come on, Your Highness. Let's go before you melt. I dragged him out of the lobby and down the exterior walkway. The rain was still hammering against the corrugated metal roof, creating a deafening roar. We found room 4, and I jammed the key into the lock, shoving the door open. The room smelled like lemon pledge and old carpet, but it was dry. I flipped the light switch. A single bulb flickered to life, illuminating a space that was mostly occupied by a massive sagging bed covered in a floral comforter. I walked in and tossed my keys on the dresser. Well, it's not the Ritz, but it beats sleeping in the bucket seats. I turned around to see Dominic standing in the doorway. He hadn't entered yet. He was gripping the doorframe with both hands, staring at the bed like it was a live grenade. The muscles in his neck were corded tight, and his chest was heaving with shallow breaths. "Are you coming in?" I asked, putting hands on my hips. "Or are you going to stand there and guard the threshold?" He stepped inside and closed the door. He didn't just close it. He engaged the deadbolt, then the chain lock, testing them with a firm tug. The sound of the locks clicking into place echoed loudly in the small room. "I am trying," he said, his voice rough, "to maintain a shred of honor, Roxanne. But being in this enclosed space with you, it is testing limits I did not know I had." He turned to face me. The room was small, way too small. He took 2 steps and he was already looming over me. The water dripping from his hair was running down his face, tracking over his lips. His eyes were dark, scanning me from my wet boots to my soaked flannel shirt. "You're shivering," he noted. "I'm fine," I lied, my teeth chattering slightly. "You are not fine. You are freezing." He pointed a commanding finger toward the small bathroom door. "Get in the shower. Turn the water as hot as it goes. Do not come out until you are warm." "What about you?" I challenged, crossing my arms. "You're soaked too." He leaned down, bracing one hand on the wall beside my head, trapping me. The scent of him, that wood smoke and rain smell, flooded my senses again, making my knees weak. "If I go into that bathroom with you," he whispered, his lips inches from my ear, "we aren't coming out. Go, before I change my mind about being a gentleman." Chapter 7. The Thin Wall. I didn't argue. I grabbed my bag from the floor. I always kept a change of clothes and toiletries in the Mustang's trunk for emergencies, and bolted into the bathroom, locking the flimsy door behind me. I turned the shower knob, and by some miracle, the water sputtered and then steamed hot. I stripped off my wet clothes, peeling the heavy denim and flannel from my skin, and stepped under the spray. The heat was instant relief, but it couldn't melt the knot of tension in my stomach. I rested my forehead against the cool tiles, closing my eyes. What was I doing? I was in a cheap motel room with a stranger I'd picked up on the side of the road, a stranger who ordered people around like he owned the planet, who looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through my clothes, and who made my heart race faster than a nitrous boost. I should be terrified. My survival instincts should be screaming stranger danger. But they weren't. Instead, my instincts were humming a very different tune. Every time he looked at me, I didn't feel threatened. I felt chosen. I grabbed the bar of soap and started scrubbing the grease and rain off my skin. Through the door, I could hear him. The walls were paper thin. I heard the heavy thud of his boots as he paced the floor. Thump, thump, thump. He wasn't sitting down. He was prowling. It sounded like a caged tiger measuring the dimensions of its cell. Thump. He stopped, right outside the bathroom door. I froze, the soap slippery in my hand. I could hear his breathing, slow, deep, ragged inhales. He was smelling the air. He was smelling me. "Roxanne," he murmured. I barely heard it over the water, but the sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I turned off the water. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with static. I grabbed the thin, scratchy white towel from the rack and wrapped it around myself, tucking the end securely over my chest. It barely covered my thighs. I took a deep breath, staring at the doorknob. Pull yourself together, Roxy. He's just a guy. A really, really hot, rich, intense guy. I unlocked the door and stepped out. Steam billowed out with me, fogging the room. Dominic had stopped pacing. He was standing at the foot of the bed, his back to me. He had taken off his suit jacket and unbuttoned his dress shirt, revealing a back that was a landscape of muscle and scars. At the sound of the latch clicking, he turned. His eyes locked onto me immediately. His gaze dropped to the towel, then tracked slowly up my bare legs, over the curve of my hips, to my damp hair. He didn't try to hide his hunger. He looked like he wanted to devour me whole. He took a step toward me, then stopped himself, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "You looked better in Greece," he said, his voice strained, trying for a joke but failing. "The clean look. It is dangerous." "Your turn," I said, my voice breathless. I pointed a trembling finger at the bathroom. "Water's hot. Don't use all the soap." He didn't move for a long second. He just stared at the pulse jumping in my throat. Then, with a groan that sounded painful, he grabbed his ruined shirt and tore it the rest of the way off. "I need cold water," he muttered, brushing past me. "Freezing." Chapter 8. The Scent of a Queen. While he was in the shower, I tried to make myself useful. I laid my wet clothes over the heater vent and sat on the edge of the massive bed, clutching the towel tight. I felt exposed, and not just physically. I felt like I was waiting for something inevitable to happen, like watching a storm front roll in over the plains. The water shut off. A moment later, the door opened. If I thought he was dangerous in a suit, he was lethal in a towel. Dominic stepped out, steam clinging to his damp skin. The towel hung low, dangerously low, on his hips, showcasing the sharp V-line of muscle that disappeared beneath the terry cloth. His chest was broad, covered in intricate tattoos that looked tribal, swirls of black ink that seemed to move when he breathed. A long, jagged scar ran from his shoulder to his pectoral muscle, a souvenir from a fight that clearly didn't involve a boardroom. He ran a hand through his wet, dark hair, pushing it back from his face. "No spare clothes," he stated, looking at his pile of soaked wool on the floor. "I didn't exactly pack a tuxedo in my trunk," I said, trying to keep my eyes on his face, and failing. He walked over to the bed. The mattress dipped significantly as he sat down on the opposite side, keeping a careful distance between us. He rested his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "You asked me earlier what I do," he said quietly. "You asked if I was mafia." "You never really answered," I replied, tucking my legs up under me. "You just said you managed territories." "I was born into a role I did not choose," he said, looking at his hands. "My father was a powerful man. He left me an empire that requires constant vigilance. I spend my life stopping wars, enforcing laws, and making sure the people under my protection don't tear each other apart." "Sounds like you're the mechanic for the whole world," I said softly. He looked up at me then, surprised by the analogy. A small smile touched his lips. "Yes, I suppose I am. But I cannot clock out at 5 p.m. I cannot go home, drink a beer, and work on a Mustang. I am always on duty. I am always the king." "That sounds lonely," I said, "and exhausting." "It is," he admitted. He shifted, turning his body toward me. The distance between us on the mattress felt like it was shrinking. "That is why, when I saw you today, yelling at the storm, fearless, I envied you. You are free, Roxanne. You answer to no one." "I answer to the bank," I quipped, trying to lighten the mood. "And to my landlord." Money is irrelevant, he dismissed. I could buy your bank tomorrow, but I cannot buy the fire inside you. That is yours. He moved then, just an inch, but the heat radiating off him slammed into me. You keep acting like you're a monster, I whispered, holding his gaze. Like you have to protect me from yourself. I am a monster, he said, his voice dropping to that gravelly rumble again. He reached out, his hand hovering near my knee. I am possessive. I am territorial. And right now, every instinct I have is screaming at me to take you and keep you. Maybe I don't want to be protected, I challenged, leaning forward slightly. Maybe I like monsters. Dominic froze. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold. He moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment he was sitting, the next he was looming over me, his hands braced on either side of my legs, trapping me against the headboard. Be careful what you invite in, little mechanic, he growled. If I am selfish, if I decide to take what I want, I will take everything. Chapter 9. The Alpha's Purr. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The magnetic pull between us was now a physical force, dragging me toward him. I'm not afraid of you, I whispered, looking up into his intense eyes. You should be, he murmured. He lowered his head. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. His nose brushed against my pulse point, and I gasped, my fingers involuntarily gripping his wet shoulders. Vanilla, he groaned against my skin. And rain. You smell like home. He started to nuzzle me, his cheek rubbing against my jaw, his nose tracing the line of my throat. It wasn't a human gesture. It was something primal, something animalistic. He was scenting me, coating himself in my smell and coating me in his. I should have been weirded out. Instead, my head fell back, exposing more of my neck to him. My hands tangled in his damp hair, pulling him closer. Dominic, I sighed. Then I felt it. A low, deep vibration started in his chest. It rumbled against my own chest, a steady, rhythmic thrumming sound. It traveled up his throat and vibrated against my skin. Brum. I froze. Are you purring? He pulled back slightly, his eyes hazy and unfocused. He looked confused, like he hadn't realized he was doing it. What? You're vibrating, I said, a breathless laugh escaping me. Like a giant cat. You're purring at me. His eyes narrowed, clarity returning. The predator snapped back into focus. I am not a cat, he said, offended. I do not purr. You totally were, I teased, feeling brave. It was cute. Cute? The word came out like a curse. I am not cute, Roxanne. I am the apex predator of this continent. Apex predators don't purr, I argued, poking his hard chest. He caught my finger. He didn't hurt me, but his grip was iron. He lowered his head again, his lips grazing the sensitive skin right under my ear. I do not purr, he whispered, his voice rough with need. I growl. And then, to prove his point, he bit me. It wasn't a hard bite. It was a nip, a graze of teeth against the tender skin where my neck met my shoulder. It was possessive, dominant, a warning and a claim all in one. A jolt of electricity shot through my body, so intense my toes curled into the sheets. The vibration in his chest returned, louder this time, a deep, menacing, satisfied growl that echoed in the small room. What are you? I breathed, my voice trembling. Chapter 10. The Reveal. Dominic pulled back slowly. He didn't let go of me. His hands were still caging me in, his body heat radiating through the thin towel. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a shuddering breath, and then opened them. I gasped. His eyes were no longer brown with flecks of gold. They were pure, molten gold, glowing, actually glowing in the dim light of the room. The pupils were vertical slits, pulsing with every beat of his heart. He watched me, waiting for the scream, waiting for me to scramble backward and call the police. "I am the Alpha King," he said, the words heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of rule. "I am the ruler of the shifter kind, the wolf inside me. He has been trying to claim you since the moment you opened that car door." The silence stretched. I looked at his glowing eyes. I looked at the inhuman strength in his arms. I thought about the clerk's terror. I thought about the way he healed, the way he moved, the way he smelled. It was impossible. It was insane. But I was a mechanic. I dealt in cause and effect. If an engine made a certain sound, it meant a certain piston was firing. If a man had glowing eyes and growled, he wasn't a man. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I reached up and cupped his face. His skin was burning hot. He flinched at my touch, looking at me with stunned disbelief. "So," I said, my thumb tracing his cheekbone. "That explains the ego." He blinked, the vertical pupils widening slightly. You are not afraid?" "I work on vintage muscle cars, Dominic," I said, a small, crooked smile touching my lips. "They're loud, they're dangerous, and if you don't handle them right, they'll kill you. I've been handling dangerous things my whole life." "I am not a car," he growled, though he leaned into my hand. "No," I agreed. "You're a big, bad wolf." I ran my fingers into the hair at the nape of his neck and tugged, forcing him to look at me. "But I've handled bigger dogs than you." Dominic let out a sound that was half laugh, half groan. The tension in his shoulders broke. He looked at me with an expression of absolute worship. "You are insane," he whispered. "You are reckless, foolish, and absolutely magnificent." "Yeah, well," I whispered back, my gaze dropping to his mouth. "You're the one who got in the car." "And now," he said, his glowing eyes darkening with intent, "I am never getting out." He lowered his head, his lips hovering millimeters from mine. "Handle me, Roxanne. Show me if you can control the beast." And then he closed the distance. Chapter 11. Surrender. His mouth crashed onto mine, and it wasn't a kiss. It was a collision. I had expected him to be rough. I had expected the beast he kept talking about to take over and ravage me. But Dominic didn't kiss me like a monster. He kissed me like a starving man who had finally found the only thing that could sustain him. His lips were hot, demanding. But there was a desperate edge to it, a trembling restraint that told me he was holding back 90% of his strength just to keep from crushing me. I didn't want him to hold back. I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my hands in his wet hair, and pulled him closer. I opened to him, and the moment our tongues touched, a shockwave of pure, molten heat exploded in my chest. It wasn't just physical. It felt like a golden thread snapping into place, tying my ribs to his, anchoring my soul to the towering man pressing me into the mattress. "Mine," he growled against my mouth, the vibration rattling my teeth. "You are mine." "Yours," I gasped back, and the word felt like a surrender I had been waiting my whole life to make. He moved over me, his weight heavy and comforting. The towel I had been clutching fell away, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel self-conscious. Under his glowing golden gaze, I didn't feel like a mechanic with grease under her nails, or a girl from the wrong side of the tracks. I felt like a goddess. He worshipped every inch of me, his rough hands tracing the curves of my body with a reverence that made my head spin. You are so small, he whispered, bracing his weight on his forearms so he wouldn't crush me. So fragile. I'm not fragile, I panted, digging my nails into his shoulders. Show me. Don't hide it, Dominic. Show me the wolf. He groaned, a sound torn from the depths of his chest, and his control snapped. The kiss deepened, becoming feral. He claimed me with a fierceness that should have been terrifying, but instead, it set my blood on fire. The storm outside had nothing on the hurricane inside that room. It was a blur of heat, skin, and the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of him filling my lungs until I couldn't remember what air tasted like. When the end came, it wasn't just a release, it was a fusion. I felt his heart hammering against mine, not just the beat, but the emotion behind it. I felt his loneliness shatter, replaced by a fierce, golden joy that mirrored my own. I cried out his name, and he roared mine, a sound that echoed like a claim staked into the earth itself. Chapter 12. The Eye of the Storm. The silence after the storm was heavy, but it was a good kind of heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes after the engine finally turns over and purrs, smooth and perfect. I lay tangled in the cheap motel sheets, my head resting on Dominic's chest. He was sprawled out on his back, taking up most of the king-sized bed. His breathing had slowed, returning to a deep, steady rhythm, but his arm was clamped around me like an iron band. Even in sleep, or near sleep, he wasn't letting go. Outside, the rain had stopped. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water falling from the eaves, and the steady thump, thump of Dominic's heart under my ear. He shifted, lifting his hand to take mine. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles. Then he stopped. He turned my hand over, tracing the thin white line of a scar across my palm, where a wrench had slipped 3 years ago. A warrior's mark, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep and contentment. It's a clumsy mechanic's mark, I corrected lazily, tracing the ink of the tattoos on his chest with my other hand. I needed 4 stitches. It proves you build, he said softly. My hands, they only know how to break. You didn't break me, I whispered. He went still. He squeezed my hand tightly, then pulled it down to rest over his heart. No. But you broke me, Roxanne. You cracked open the armor I have worn for 200 years. 200? I shot up on one elbow, staring at him. Wait, how old are you? He opened one eye, the gold fading back to a warm, amused brown. Old enough to know better. Young enough to still be reckless. That's not a number, Dominic, I said, narrowing my eyes. Am I robbing the cradle or the grave here? I am 32, he chuckled, pulling me back down. In human years. But the wolf, the lineage, it is ancient. And today, for the first time in centuries, the wolf is quiet. He is satisfied. Good, I yawned, the exhaustion finally hitting me like a freight train. Because if he starts purring again, I'm kicking him off the bed. Dominic laughed, a genuine boyish sound that vibrated through his chest. He kissed the top of my head, wrapping the duvet tighter around us. Sleep, my queen, he whispered into my hair. Rest, because when the sun rises, the world will try to intrude, and I need you ready to rule it. I wanted to ask what he meant by rule, but my eyelids were too heavy. I drifted off to the sound of his heartbeat, feeling safe for the first time in my life. I didn't know that while I slept, the gears of his empire were already turning, coming to find us. Chapter 13. Morning Glory. I woke up to the smell of bacon. A lot of bacon. Sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the blackout curtains, slicing across the room like laser beams. I groaned, stretching my limbs, and felt a dull, pleasant ache in my muscles that brought a rush of memories from the night before. I blushed, burying my face in the pillow. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." I peeked out. Dominic was already dressed. Well, sort of. He was wearing his suit trousers, which had dried but were horribly wrinkled, and his white dress shirt, unbuttoned and sleeves rolled up. He looked disheveled and devastatingly handsome. He was sitting at the tiny round table in the corner, which was groaning under the weight of everything. There were stacks of pancakes, mounds of eggs, towers of toast, and enough bacon to feed a football team. "Did you rob a diner?" I asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet with me. "Wolf metabolism," he said unapologetically, tearing a piece of toast in half and devouring it. "And you need to eat. You used a lot of energy last night." He winked. The Alpha King actually winked. I grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. He caught it effortlessly with one hand, not even looking up from his eggs. "Room service?" I asked, eyeing the feast. "The clerk was accommodating," Dominic said. "I believe he cooked this himself out of fear." He stood up, walking over to the bed with a plate piled high. He sat down and held out a forkful of eggs. "Eat." "I can feed myself," I protested, though I leaned forward and took the bite. "I know," he said, his eyes darkening slightly as he watched me chew. "But I like taking care of you. You spend your life fixing things for others, Roxanne. Let me fix this for you." It was sweet, terrifyingly sweet. We ate in a comfortable silence, sharing the food, stealing kisses that tasted like maple syrup and coffee. For an hour, it felt like we were just a normal couple on a road trip, just a mechanic and a guy in a ruined suit. "So," I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin, "what happens now? Do we just get back in the car and finish the drive?" Dominic set his coffee cup down. His expression shifted. The playful lover vanished, replaced instantly by the king. He tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. "No," he said softly. "The drive is over." "What do you mean?" Suddenly, the room began to vibrate. It wasn't the purring this time. It was a deep, mechanical rumble that shook the floorboards. It sounded like a freight train was parking in the lot. "Dominic?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "What is that?" Chapter 14. The Convoy. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing the sheet and wrapping it around me like a toga, and ran to the window. I peeked through the gap in the curtains. My jaw dropped. The gravel parking lot of the Blue Moon Motel, which had been empty last night save for my Mustang and his Bugatti, was now a sea of black. At least 20 massive armored SUVs were parked in precise formation. They looked like tanks disguised as luxury vehicles. Men in dark tactical gear with earpieces were swarming the perimeter, moving with terrifying efficiency. There were even 2 guys on the roof of the building across the street, with what looked suspiciously like sniper rifles. "Oh my God," I breathed, backing away from the window. "The FBI is here. Or the CIA. Dominic, what did you do? Did we steal the towel? Is this about the towel?" Dominic laughed. He stood up calmly and walked to the mirror, attempting to smooth down his wrinkled collar. "It is not the FBI, sweetheart, and they aren't here for the towel." "Then who are those guys with guns?" I hissed, looking around for my jeans. "We need to run. Is there a back exit?" "Roxanne," Dominic said, his voice cutting through my panic like a blade. "Stop." He walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. He turned me to face the window again. "Look at the license plates," he said. I looked. They didn't have government plates. They all had a small golden emblem of a wolf's head embossed on the bumper. "That," Dominic said, a smirk touching his lips, "is my ride." "You have an army?" I whispered. "I have a pack," he corrected, "and a security detail that is very upset I went off the grid for 12 hours. Just then, 3 sharp knocks rapped on the door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the knock of someone who would kick the door down if it wasn't opened in 3 seconds. "Sire," a deep voice boomed from the other side. "Perimeter is secure. Extraction team is ready." Dominic looked at me. "Are you ready to meet the family?" I looked down at my sheet toga and my messy hair. "I'm not wearing pants, Dominic. You can't open the door." "You have 2 minutes," he said, checking an invisible watch. "Wear the jeans with the oil stain. I like those." I scrambled into the bathroom, throwing my clothes on faster than I ever had in my life. I splashed water on my face, ran fingers through my tangled hair, and took a deep breath. "You're a vain," I told my reflection. "You don't break for anyone." When I came out, Dominic was waiting by the door. He held out his hand. "Do not be afraid," he said seriously. "They bark, but they only bite if I tell them to." "That's not comforting," I snapped. He smiled, unlocked the deadbolt, and threw the door open. Chapter 15. Bow Down. The sunlight hit us instantly. The rain had washed the world clean, leaving the air crisp and sharp. Standing directly in front of the door was a wall of men. The man in front, the one who had knocked, was a giant, nearly as big as Dominic, with a scar running through his eyebrow and an earpiece buzzing in his ear. When Dominic stepped over the threshold, the giant snapped his heels together. "Sire," the man said, bowing his head sharply. Then, behind him, the entire parking lot moved. 20 men, heavily armed and looking like they ate rocks for breakfast, dropped to one knee in perfect unison. The sound of their boots hitting the gravel was like a gunshot. They weren't just bowing, they were submitting. It was a display of absolute, terrifying power. Dominic didn't even blink. He accepted their submission as easily as he accepted the air he breathed. He held my hand tighter, pulling me out of the shadows of the room and into the light beside him. "Rise," Dominic commanded. The men stood up as one. Their eyes instantly snapped to me. There was confusion in their gazes. They saw the flannel, the boots, the messy hair. They were sniffing the air, smelling him on me, smelling the bond. The giant in front widened his eyes. "Sire, the human?" "Careful, Marcus," Dominic warned, his voice low and dangerous. "You are speaking of your queen." Marcus paled. He looked at me, looked at Dominic's glowing eyes, and immediately dropped to his knee again. "Forgive me, my lady. We did not know." It's cool," I stammered, waving a hand awkwardly. "You can stand up. Please, stand up. You're making me nervous." Dominic chuckled, guiding me toward the center of the lot where a sleek black limousine sat waiting with its door open. "What about the cars?" Marcus asked, scrambling to follow. "We have a flatbed for the Bugatti, sire. Should we have the other vehicle towed to the scrapyard?" He gestured to my Mustang. My baby. My '69 fastback. I opened my mouth to yell at him, but Dominic beat me to it. The air around him turned ice cold. He stopped walking and turned slowly to face his general. "Scrapyard?" Dominic repeated, the word dripping with venom. Marcus flinched. "I assumed it is old." "It is that car," Dominic growled, pointing at the Mustang. is the Queen's chariot. It carried me through the storm when my own technology failed. You will treat it with more respect than you treat me. You will load it onto the finest transport we have, and you will ensure not a single scratch appears on its paint. Do you understand? Yes, sire. Immediately, sire. Marcus shouted, barking orders into his radio. Dominic turned back to me, his face softening. Ready to go home, Roxanne? I think I need a drink, I muttered, looking at the limousine. There is champagne in the back, he promised. He helped me into the limo. As the door closed, shutting out the world of soldiers and bowing wolves, I realized I wasn't just in the passenger seat anymore. I was on a whole new ride. But as the limo began to move, gliding smoothly out of the lot, Dominic didn't look at the road. He picked up a tablet from the seat, tapped the screen, and handed it to me. I have a surprise, he said. Look. Chapter 16. The Upgrade. I looked down at the tablet resting in my lap. I expected to see a prenup, or maybe a non-disclosure agreement threatening to feed me to the wolves if I talked to the press. Instead, I was looking at a 3D architectural rendering of a building. It was gorgeous. Glass, steel, and polished concrete. It looked like a museum for modern art, but as I swiped across the screen, I saw the interior. Hydraulic lifts, a state-of-the-art diagnostic bay, a paint booth with ventilation systems that cost more than my house. And right above the massive rolling glass doors, a neon sign glowed in the rendering. Vane's Auto and Restoration. I stared at it, my throat going dry. What is this? I had my architects draw it up while you were sleeping, Dominic said casually, pouring 2 flutes of champagne from the limo's console. It's a rough draft, of course. You can change the layout. I wasn't sure if you preferred the dyno room on the east or west wing. I looked up at him, feeling a sudden flare of defensive heat. Dominic, I have a shop. It's on 4th Street. It's got a leaky roof and a coffee machine that tastes like battery acid, but it's mine. I know, he said, handing me a glass. And now, this is yours. I can't accept this, I said, shoving the tablet back at him. I'm not some kept woman, Dominic. I don't need you to buy me a shiny new toy so I can play mechanic while you rule the world. I built my business from the ground up. Dominic set his glass down. The playful smirk vanished, replaced by that intense golden-brown gaze that pinned me to the seat. He reached out, covering my grease-stained hand with his manicured one. I am not trying to buy you, Roxanne, he said firmly. I am trying to keep you. I'm not going anywhere, I argued. You are, he corrected. You are coming to live with me, in the pack house. But I know you. If I put you in a castle with nothing to do but attend tea parties and choose drapery, you will burn the place down within a week just to feel the heat. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He wasn't wrong. I don't want a trophy wife, Dominic continued, his thumb stroking my knuckles. I don't want a queen who sits on a throne and looks pretty. I fell in love with a woman who yelled at me in the rain. I fell in love with the grease on your face and the fire in your gut. I want that woman. I just want her to be closer to me. He tapped the screen. This facility will be built on the estate grounds, 200 yards from my office. You will run it. You will staff it. You will fix the fleet, restore your classics, and charge me triple for the labor if you want. But you will be there. I looked back at the screen. It was beautiful. It was every mechanic's dream. And he wasn't asking me to change. He was just giving me a bigger stage. Triple for labor? I asked, a small smile tugging at my lips. And parts, he agreed instantly. I sighed, leaning back into the plush leather. Okay. But I'm keeping my old coffee machine. It keeps me humble. Deal, he said, clinking his glass against mine. The limo began to slow down. The privacy partition slid down, and the driver spoke. "Approaching the main gate, sire." I looked out the tinted window and gasped. We weren't pulling up to a house. We were pulling up to a fortress. Massive iron gates were swinging open, revealing a winding driveway that led up to a sprawling stone mansion that looked less like a home and more like a seat of government. It was terrifyingly grand. "Ready?" Dominic asked, sensing my hesitation. "No," I admitted. "Good," he said, taking my hand. "Neither was I, until I met you." Chapter 17. The Alpha's Mechanic. 2 months later. The sound of the pneumatic impact wrench whirring at full torque was the only music I needed. Zip, zip, zip! The lug nuts flew off the wheel of the armored SUV, and I caught them in my gloved hand with practiced ease. "Hey, Marco!" I yelled over the noise of the compressor. "Toss me the 10mm socket, and if you say you lost it again, I'm docking your pay." Marco, a burly werewolf who could probably bench press a truck, but was terrified of me, scrambled to find the tool. "Got it, boss! Here!" I caught the socket mid-air and grinned. Life in the palace garage, as the pack called it, was chaotic, loud, and perfect. The facility Dominic had built was insane. I had a team of 12 mechanics, all wolves, all eager to please the queen, and a backlog of work that kept me busy from dawn till dusk. I wiped my forehead with the back of my arm, leaving a streak of black grease across my brow. I was wearing my favorite coveralls, navy blue, covered in oil stains, with Roxy embroidered on the pocket. My hair was tied up in a messy bun that was slowly unraveling. I was in my element. "Your Majesty?" Marco asked nervously, pointing toward the glass doors. We have company." I looked up. Through the glass wall that separated the garage from the main courtyard, I saw a delegation walking toward the main house. It was a group of visiting alphas and dignitaries in $1,000 suits and silk dresses. They looked pristine, expensive, and boring. And walking right in the middle of them, looking like a dark god of war, was Dominic. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him like armor. He was nodding at something a short, balding man, Ambassador Sterling from the Southern Territories, was saying. I hadn't seen Dominic all day. He'd been stuck in meetings since 6 a.m. I felt a pang of longing. I put down the wrench. "Keep working, guys. I'm just going to get a snack." I walked out of the bay doors and into the courtyard, intending to sneak around the back to the kitchens. But of course, with my luck, the delegation turned at that exact moment. Ambassador Sterling stopped. He saw me. He looked at my boots, my stained coveralls, and the smudge on my face. His nose wrinkled as if he'd just stepped in something unpleasant. "Good heavens," Sterling sneered, his voice carrying across the quiet courtyard. "King Dominic, I thought you had stricter standards for the help. Letting the custodial staff wander the main grounds during a summit? It's rather unrefined." The silence that fell over the group was instant and heavy. The other dignitaries froze. They knew who I was. Sterling, evidently, did not. I stopped walking. I hooked my thumbs into my tool belt, ready to fire back a retort that would peel the paint off his Mercedes. But I didn't get the chance. Dominic stopped mid-stride. The polite, diplomatic mask he had been wearing shattered. He turned slowly toward Sterling. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "The help?" Dominic repeated, his voice low, vibrating with a growl that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Well, yes," Sterling laughed nervously, gesturing at my grease-stained clothes. "Look at her. Clearly a laborer. I'm just saying, appearance is everything, Your Majesty." Dominic didn't look at Sterling. He looked at me. His eyes flared gold, bright and burning. He started walking toward me, ignoring the ambassador, ignoring the gasps of the crowd. He crossed the courtyard in 3 long strides. He didn't care about the grease. He didn't care about the audience. He walked right up to me, grabbed the lapels of my dirty coveralls, and pulled me crashing into his chest. His expensive suit was instantly ruined, smeared with oil and grime. "Hi," I breathed, looking up at him. "Hi," he growled. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a polite peck. It was a claiming. He devoured me right there in front of the Southern delegation, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, his hands gripping my waist possessively. He kissed me until my knees went weak, and I had to cling to his jacket to stay upright. When he finally pulled back, he kept his arm firmly around my waist, pressing me to his side. He turned to face the horrified Ambassador Sterling. "This," Dominic announced, his voice booming like thunder, "is not the help. This is my mate, my queen, and the only person on this planet who is allowed to get me dirty." Sterling went white. Your Majesty, I didn't—" "Careful, Ambassador," Dominic warned, his hand tightening on my hip. "You are speaking to the owner of my heart. And frankly, that grease on her face is worth more to me than your entire bloodline." Chapter 18. The Passenger Seat. The Sunday morning sun hit the pavement of the estate's driveway, making the chrome bumper of my '69 Mustang gleam like a mirror. She was back, and she was beautiful. It had taken 3 weeks in the new shop to get the water damage out of the upholstery and flush the engine. But looking at her now, idling with that low, throaty rumble that vibrated in my chest, you'd never know she'd been drowned in a monsoon. The black paint was polished to a liquid shine, reflecting the sprawling stone facade of the pack house behind her. I wiped a speck of imaginary dust from the hood with a microfiber cloth, grinning like an idiot. "You look at that car with more affection than you look at me." I turned around. Dominic was standing at the top of the stone steps. He was wearing jeans, actual denim jeans, and a black t-shirt that hugged his biceps tight enough to be illegal in several states. He held 2 travel mugs of coffee, looking relaxed, happy, and devastatingly handsome. "Don't be jealous," I teased, tossing the cloth onto the nearby bench. "She was my first love. You're just the trophy husband I picked up on the highway." Dominic chuckled, walking down the steps with that predatory grace that never quite went away. He handed me a coffee. "Trophy husband? I believe the title is king." "Details." I waved a hand, taking a sip. It was perfect. Hazelnut, 2 sugars. He always remembered. He leaned against the fender of the car, his hip bumping mine. "So, is she ready?" "She's better than ready," I said, patting the roof. "She's begging to run. I tuned the carburetor myself. She'll do 0 to 60 faster than your security detail can panic." "Good," Dominic said. He finished his coffee in 1 long swallow and set the mug down on the bench. "Because I need to get out of here. If I have to listen to 1 more council member complain about territory disputes, I'm going to shift and eat them." "Road trip?" I asked, my eyes lighting up. "Just a drive," he promised. "No destination. Just us and the road." He pushed off the car and walked around the front hood toward the driver's side door. He reached for the handle, his movements automatic, assumed. He was the alpha. He led. He drove. That was the law of his nature. I stood there on the passenger side, dangling the keys on my index finger. Jingle, jingle. Dominic froze. His hand hovered over the door handle. He looked up, across the roof of the car, to see me standing there with my eyebrows raised and a smirk playing on my lips. "What are you doing?" he asked slowly. "Waiting for you to get in," I said sweetly. "Roxanne," he sighed, giving me that look, the one that made entire armies drop to their knees. "I am driving." "Nope," I popped the P. "My car, my rules. Remember?" "That was when I was a stranger you were rescuing," he argued, though his eyes were dancing with amusement. "I am your mate. I am the king. I drive." "And I'm the queen," I countered, tossing the keys in the air and catching them with a snap. "And the queen says your heavy foot is going to flood my engine. You're strictly cargo today, big guy." He stared at me. The golden flecks in his eyes swirled. For a second, the air between us charged with that familiar electric tension, the battle of wills that we both loved so much. He could take the keys. He could use his speed, his strength, his command. He could force the issue. But he didn't want to. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't the arrogant smirk he'd worn the night we met. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated adoration. He shook his head, letting out a laugh that sounded like freedom. "You are a tyrant," he murmured. "I learned from the best." I winked. "Now." I jerked my head toward the passenger seat. "Get in, unless you want to walk." Dominic stepped back from the driver's door. He walked